there, welcome back to another video. This time around, it is my review of the 1986 film Sid and Nancy. Now, before I get around to sharing more of my thoughts on this film, I want to give a special shout out to Vontae for requesting this review. And if there's another film, TV show, or topic that you would like to see me discuss in the future, feel free to donate to my PayPal. Link will be in the video description down below, and I will try to get to it as soon as I possibly can. Now, Sid and Nancy is one of those films that over the years has gotten a cult following, and I feel that it's, for the most part, deserved. I don't love this movie. I did ultimately like it, but it's not a film that I would say is one of my personal favorites when it comes to films dealing with musicians. It's just one of those movies where there's just a few elements and a few aspects of it that just didn't really cut it for me. So that's why it's one of those movies that I like, but I definitely don't love. And I will detail why I feel that way soon enough. But it's a movie that I definitely do agree deserves some form of acclaim. And I'm glad that it's gotten a cult following because it didn't do well when it came out. It only made like $2.8 million on a $4 million budget. Critically, it did okay. It got a lot of good reviews, but for whatever reason, it just didn't turn into a good box office. I think it did better on home video. And speaking of home video, this is a great release by Criterion. Highly recommended if you're a fan of this film. And this is one of those movies that I would say when it comes to the script and the story, it's not really that great. I think it could be a lot better in that department. But when it comes to the visuals and when it comes to its style, it's absolutely fantastic. Like, this is a movie that just really is quite a visual splendor, despite just the trash and the junkies and the used needles and just the gross and just nasty look and feel of it. It's still a movie that just has some imagery that is just very striking and very memorable, and in large part it's due to what Alex Cox brings to the film when it comes to his direction. Alex Cox, he already did a wonderful job with his directorial debut in Repo Man before this, and then he just continues that trajectory with his sophomore effort in Sid and Nancy. I just love the way that he shot this film. It's very dynamic. It's got a lot of variety when it comes to camera angles and different techniques that he's employing. It's a movie that just has some really just powerhouse, just knockout sequences when it comes to the visuals and the direction. The My Way sequence with all of the bright white lights, the sequence with Sid and Nancy where they are sitting in their hotel room as it's burning around them, the various different other dream sequences, even the concert scenes, just the way that things are lit and the way that things are shot in general is just really well done. This is a great looking movie. Even a shot as simple as Sid and Nancy just standing in front of a dumpster kissing while there's trash falling around them is gorgeous. Like, it's a film that deals with some very depressing and just dark stuff, and the tale of a couple who just completely destroy each other due to drug addiction and other bits of just depravity. And it's a film that, despite all of that, it just looks great. And the Criterion remaster, the 4K remaster, is just stunning. So it's just one of those movies where, yeah, it's a rough watch when it comes to the subject matter and how depressing it is, but it's not a rough watch at all when it comes to the direction or the visual style. Like, when it comes to that, the film is a treat. It really is. Alex Cox, he absolutely rocked it. His direction in this just rocks your socks off. It's just perfectly representative of the punk rock aesthetic. Like, it's a great looking movie, and it has that edge to it and that rawness that you want out of a punk rock film. Now, the screenplay by Alex Cox and Abby Wool, it's one of those scripts where I think there are certain notes to it that are great. I think certain elements of this script are really good, especially how it grabs you by the throat from the very opening scene with Sid being arrested, and it does a great job bringing up all these questions and also wanting you to see them answered. So it has a compelling beginning, and it continues to be somewhat engaging and compelling for the first 30 to 40 minutes, because you're wanting to see what's going to happen next. You want to see the answer. You want to see why Sid was arrested, what happened in that hotel room. You want to see what's going to happen with Nancy. So when it introduces Nancy into the fold, it's effective at that point because it's something that feels fresh and new. And I feel that there are some aspects of, like, the band Sid Vicious is a part of, uh, uh, the Sex Pistols, that also works too when it comes to the script and the way that the two handled it. But I don't feel that the way that they handled the band in general was really that good. I think initially it's okay, but if you really do any amount of research and you look into things, you see that the way that certain characters, I mean, certain people are portrayed, like Johnny, is not accurate at all. He's just like this, he's just a louse who's like eating beans and burping and farting all the time. It just felt like it was a really piss poor portrayal of that very integral member of the band. Also, the other band members just seem like they're nothing. And I get it, it's called Sid and Nancy, and they're the focus. But at a certain point, those two are not enough to carry the story, because they're not doing anything other than getting high and just sitting in hotel rooms or going out and just being awful. Like, that's all that's happening. And at a certain point, that becomes repetitive and boring. It becomes an old hat. So I feel not having more of a focus on the band and specifically what they are doing and how they are doing after the breakup of the Sex Pistols was a huge missed opportunity when it comes to this story. You could still have it be focused on Sid and Nancy. They are the main focus here. But then you also have some scenes that break up the monotony of the uh, addiction angle of the two addicts, where you show Johnny and I know there are some attempts to do this, but it's not handled very well. It seems like it's an afterthought. But you have more scenes like that, but you have more meat on the bone when it comes to those scenes. You have more to them. So you have a scene, for instance, where he's going to a party and everyone's having a blast, but he's sitting there and he's depressed and he's not drinking and he's not happy because the band is gone. The Sex Pistols is no more. And so he isn't necessarily having a good time. Maybe he is drinking, but like when he takes a swig, like he's not. It's not doing anything. It's not making him feel better. It's not making him feel anything different than what he's already feeling at that time. And then you juxtapose that with Sid and Nancy during one of their drug binges, just being just loud and obnoxious and laughing and giggling and just being silly and just oblivious to everything. And then you see the reality of it with Johnny or other members of the band, and see what's happening with their lives and what's happening with their home lives now that the band is no longer a thing, and so on. Like, I just think that would have been so much more interesting and so much more compelling than just the repetitive scenes that involve Sid and Nancy getting high on drugs and just being high. Like, that just gets incredibly old. It gets as old and used up as a dirty syringe needle at a certain point. And speaking of old and used up, the approach that the writers had for Nancy is something that also gets very tiresome very quickly. Initially, when she first shows up, yeah, she's very brash, she's very in your face, but it was kind of a breath of fresh air. It was different. But then as the story continues and you don't get anything in terms of who she is as a person, you don't get anything in terms of this character other than the same brashness and the same loudness and the same whinging. It just gets incredibly irritating, and not in a way where, oh, it's enjoyable or fun. Like, no, it's incredibly obnoxious, and you cease to give a shit about Nancy at that point. And when the film is focusing more on her, you're like, I don't care. I don't care about what's going on with her parents or her family. I don't care about her relationship with Sid. I don't give a shit about Nancy. And I feel that the two writers, they didn't do enough research when it comes to Nancy Spungen. It's like they heard the term nauseating Nancy, which she was nicknamed, and that's all that they really took or gleaned from this character or from this person. And I feel that was a mistake, because there's more to Nancy than that. If you watch interviews with Nancy Spungen, like the actual interviews, yeah, she's out of it. She's drugged. She's drugged up. She's just completely just out of it. But at the same time, she's able to have these moments where she breaks out of her drug haze and shows some charisma, shows some personality, shows some charm. She's making jokes. She's talking to Sid and trying to get him to wake up so he can do the interview. She's even cognizant enough that she's talking to the reporters and saying, "Hey, I'm sorry. Like, I know you didn't come here to interview me." That kind of thing. But in the script for Sid and Nancy, she's just either a dumb bimbo or she's just annoying, and I feel that, and or just desperate, desperate for the next fix. It's just one of those three things. And there's a few moments where, okay, she might be emotional and distraught, but most of the time it's whinging, it's being annoying and obnoxious and loud, and just being dumb, or just being an asshole too. And I get it. I understand that a lot of people that were around her said a lot of the same things and shared a lot of the same sentiments and didn't have a lot of good things to say about her. But this is a film. You can take some creative differences. You can take some creative liberty here, and you can make this character into something that is more interesting and a little more sympathetic. So then when she joins Sid in this journey into self-destruction and she gets ultimately killed by it, you actually feel something. Because as it is, you don't feel a damn thing, because there's no reason to actually care about Nancy. So, and that's something that you could have had too. I don't know if the book that Nancy's mom wrote, I don't know if that was around. I don't know if that was out yet by the time that this film came out. But if it was, you could have used that for the script, because Nancy had a long history of being hooked on drugs ever since she was a kid. She had a mother that cared about her and legitimately tried to do everything she could to help her. She had a history of mental illness that's never covered here, that's never mentioned here. So you don't have that sympathy of, well, she was mentally ill, and it wasn't just all the result of her just making bad decisions and deciding to get high all the time. There was something more to it. And you don't get any of that here. She just comes across as just a useless, irritating junkie. And the only thing that ever breaks up the monotony of that character, or the monotony of the two and their descent into drug addicted malaise, is like a dream sequence, or some moments where there's some loud music playing, like a concert scene or something. And I feel that that really is something that brings this film down. Not a ton. I still like the movie, but it is a big reason why I don't love this film, because of the fact that I don't care about Nancy at a certain point, and the tale of the two getting high just gets really old. It gets really old and repetitive. But I do appreciate the fact that the script doesn't pull any punches. It's very realistic. It's very raw. It shows drug addiction in a way that's not really that glamorized. I don't understand some of the critics who say that it glamorizes drug addiction. I don't see that at all. Like, it really doesn't. There's a lot of scenes in this where they're just sitting there in a comatose state, not really doing anything. They're not really having fun. They're just high. Uh, it shows what drugs can do to a career. The just waste of Sid's career is just tragic. Seeing the scenes where he's just trying to play the guitar and sing the words at a club, and he doesn't remember the lyrics, and he has to look at a piece of paper, and he's singing in front of an audience of nobody at that point. That's really strong and powerful stuff. So the script, even though yes, there are elements of it that I feel are lacking, it's still a screenplay that still ultimately works, but I don't feel it works as well as it could. Now, the cast, on the other hand, other than Chloe Webb, which I'm going to get a lot of controversy, and I'm probably going to get a lot of flack from and a flock of people who are not going to be happy with me when it comes to my opinion of her performance. But other than her, I think this cast is great. At least when it comes to the roles that they're given and what they're given to work with. I mean, I can't really say a whole lot about Johnny, about Andrew Schofield, because like, what he doesn't have a character to work with. He's basically doing a cameo role. But Gary Oldman as Sid Vicious, just an absolutely amazing performance. He did a spectacular job playing Sid Vicious. I understand Gary, he has this feeling nowadays that he did a bad job. I don't feel that way at all. Did he play a Sid Vicious that was, I guess, exactly who Sid was? No. But this was a stylized, romanticized version of Sid and Nancy anyway, so I don't really feel that was necessarily a problem. What he did do is just delivered a very daring performance that just is just absolutely a genuine revelation, because it just shows how talented Gary Oldman was. He deserved an Oscar nod for this. He really did, because of how much he transformed himself and how far he was willing to go with this performance. He was willing to debase himself. He was willing to literally cut himself. He was willing to lose all of his weight. He was willing to just put himself through the ringer. And even through all of that, he was still able to deliver a performance that was very affecting, very memorable, very iconic in its own way. The scene where he's performing My Way is absolutely magnificent, in large part because he's the one that's singing. He's doing the singing. They didn't have any actual Sid Vicious or Sex Pistols songs in the soundtrack. It was all either Gary Oldman singing or other members of the cast singing. And I thought that was interesting, and I thought it paid off, especially when it comes to a scene like My Way. It's just an absolutely stunning performance. Really one of my favorite performances of Gary's, for sure. And honestly, the biggest reason why I would recommend this film, other than the direction by Alex Cox and some of the other elements like Roger Deakins' cinematography. Now, Gary's co-star, Chloe Webb. I know I'm going to get a lot of controversy for this statement, but I got to be honest. That's all I'm here for. That's what I do. I was not impressed. I was not impressed by this performance. I understand that it was a difficult role. I understand that it's a character that by design is mostly just annoying and a dumb bimbo. And in that regard, I guess she did a decent job. And I will give her credit for the scenes where Nancy is more emotionally distraught or she's desperate, and she's just crying and she's dealing with anxiety and so on and trying to get her next fix and just a sheer desperation that she showcases. I will give her credit for that. I think she's very believable and is very strong in those scenes. But in every other scene in the film where she's supposed to just be this bimbo junkie type of character, I didn't buy it. I know there's a lot of critics, a lot of people who feel that her performance was so authentic and so believable. I felt otherwise. To me, it came across as an actress who's overcompensating, an actress that is trying way too hard to act like a junkie and to act obnoxious and to act uh, like this character to the point where it was a literal cartoon and it was hard for me to watch. I not only didn't like the character and the way that the character was written, because the character is very one note, but I also didn't like the performance. So it just made the whole scene, the whole film, for the most part, when it comes to the majority of the scenes featuring Nancy, hard to watch because I did not like this performance and I did not like the character. And no offense to Chloe Webb, I think she's a decent actress, but I don't think this was the right role for her. And I don't think she was necessarily, at that point in her career, really talented enough to pull it off. It's a difficult role to pull off for anyone, which is why I think they should have done a wider casting search, should have grabbed an actress and got her in the film, not just because they look a certain way. I really feel it was a lot of, oh, she looks a certain way and she nails the accent and she nails the attitude. But she does it in a way that's not believable. So what does it really matter? Like, why does it matter that she nails the attitude? If you don't buy it, I mean, it was just so fake to me. It's about as fake as the foundation that she caked on throughout the entire running time of the movie. And here's the other thing: Nancy, as a real life person, she was very young. Chloe Webb didn't look like she was the part in that way either. Chloe Webb did not look like she was in her early 20s. I know that's a very superficial kind of thing, but you're trying to be realistic right here, right? You're trying to have a more realistic, I get, and also stylistic and romanticized take on Sid and Nancy. But aren't you trying to do something where you're trying to showcase a downward spiral and show like a wasted life, a wasted youth? You don't really get that with Chloe Webb because you don't buy that it's a wasted youth. And no offense to Chloe Webb, but you just don't buy it because of the fact that she's not that young. She wasn't that young when she did this film. And that's the reason why she has so much makeup on, just to make it look like she's that young, but it's never believable. You can tell that it's just makeup. And speaking of makeup, it just seems like she's making up a lot of things. Like she just has to make up a lot for things that I don't really necessarily feel she technically has in her repertoire as an actress. This is the same actress who was Elaine, the lady who was abducted by aliens at the Paramus Holiday Inn at the beginning of Ghostbusters 2. It's the same actress who was a co-star in Twins. Like, you look at her filmography, you look at what she did before this, you look at what she did after, there really isn't another role like this. So I don't really feel that she was necessarily the best actress for the part. And I feel like I'm literally the only one, and that's fine. But like I said, I'm just going to be honest with you every time, even if it's a controversial opinion. And I know this is going to be one. But yeah, I didn't think this was that great of a performance. I really didn't. I didn't buy it. A lot of it was just overcompensating, over exaggerating things with the vocal inflection. Sid, 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 what about our farewell drug, Sid? And the scenes where she's supposed to be angry or petulant, or she's supposed to be just mean, like it looked like she was just mean mugging for the camera with her mannerisms and the way that she said her lines. Fuck you. Nobody cares about you. They only care about Sid. Sid knows the words. Sid knows the words. Like, I'm not exaggerating. That is literally how she sounds in this movie. That is literally how her acting is for the majority of this film. If you've seen this movie, tell me I'm wrong. Please. So it's just, yeah, I don't think it's that great of a performance. I really don't, especially compared to Gary Oldman. Gary Oldman blows her out of the water in every single scene that they share with one another, except for maybe one or two near the end. Other than that, you're in one scene, you're watching a budding master at work, one of the best, most finest young actors of his time, and then you're watching another actor, another actress. That's what it feels like watching these two act alongside one another. The best scenes involving Chloe Webb as Nancy are scenes where she's not saying a word, when she's not really speaking a lot of dialogue, about 98% of the running time. Now, the rest of the cast, fine. David Hayman is Malcolm McLaren. Debby Bishop is Phoebe. Andrew Schofield is Johnny Rotten, even though he's not a very true to life take on Johnny. Xander Berkley, I thought was really good as Bowery Snacks, his friend who's also providing Sid and Nancy with all these drugs. Really good early role by him. Courtney Love is also in this as Gretchen, one of the friends of the Sex Pistols, one of the groupies. Apparently she auditioned for the role of Nancy. They were considering it, but she was a nobody at the time, didn't really do a lot, didn't really have a whole lot of experience, so they didn't want to cast her. I think she could have honestly done just as good of a job as Chloe Webb did. Might have had a little bit more potential, possibly, because you see her tap into that in her role in People versus Larry Flint. But I see why they went the direction that they went with that character, with that performance. But I would say that she looks more like Nancy to me, to my eyes, than Chloe did. So if they were just looking for visual accuracy, she might have been a better casting choice. And also at the same time, like, what is really the difference here? Like, the way that the character is written in the script, there really isn't a ton of scenes where you really have to be great in terms of the acting. Just have some charm, some charisma, believably portray somebody who is high, who's a junkie. And I definitely feel Courtney Love could definitely do that. So I think it would have been interesting, at the very least, to have seen what she could have done playing Nancy versus what we got with Chloe Webb. The rest of the cast, not really much to say, but they're fine. I honestly would not say that there's a performance in that bunch that is particularly bad or awful, and everything's solid enough. When it comes to the other technical aspects of the movie, the cinematography by Roger Deakins is just sublime. It's so good. I love the way that he shot this film. I love the way that he worked with Alex Cox. Yeah, it's grungy, it's grimy, it's dirty looking, but it has this inherent beauty to it. And it's just such a visual treat. It really is. It's a great looking film. You love watching the way that he's shooting the alleyways and the dank apartments and the punk clubs and everything. It just a great looking film. It just transports you to another world every time you see it because of the way that it's shot by Deakins, as well as directed by Alex Cox. The editing by David Martin, I also think, is quite good, especially when it comes to the more frenetic, more frenzied sort of sequences, or even some of the slower scenes that are just trying to showcase just the state of mind that characters are in, that Sid and Nancy are in while they're in one of their binges. Um, the music by Joe Strummer, Pray for Rain and the Pogues, I also think is quite good. Honestly, pretty great. I actually even like a fair amount of the instrumental bits that are in the film. I like the song Love Kills by Joe Strummer. I think the whole soundtrack is pretty sick, to be honest, even though, yeah, you don't really have a ton of legitimate punk rock artists. And Joe Strummer is not even really what you would say a legitimate uh, parallel to the Sex Pistols. But it's still, in my opinion, a good soundtrack with a lot of um, good songs, and the the Sex Pistols and the Sid Vicious songs that the actors performed, they did a really good job. I will say that in that regard, the actor who played Johnny Rotten, Andrew Schofield, I think that he shined the most when it comes to the scenes where he's just singing on stage. But yeah, overall, like it's a really good soundtrack. A lot of great songs. I mean, Love Kills, um, by Joe Strummer. Circle Jerks also did a song called that. Burning Room by Pray for Rain. Um, I think the actor sang that. I think that's what I think Joe Schofield did. I could be wrong though. I could be completely out of out of my mind, so to speak, saying that he sung the Sex Pistols tracks. But I think I remember reading something that was the case. But I could be just mixing up things with Gary Oldman, because Gary Oldman for sure sang his parts in the film. But yeah, good soundtrack. And the film's like 114 minutes, and it does drag at points. I'm just gonna be honest. It starts off really hot, but then it just starts to tail off after a certain point because it just becomes so repetitive and dull, because it just starts just focusing solely on Sid and Nancy and their descent into self-destruction uh, via drug addiction. And there's only so much you can do to spice that kind of thing up, so to speak. But it's still a film that I would ultimately recommend. I did like it. Don't get me wrong, folks. I did like it. I was critical of it at times, but I did like the film, and I'm glad to have it in my collection. Um, and it is very much a movie that, to me personally, does very adequately and fairly accurately represent what punk rock is about, and at least from the aesthetic point of view. Um, but yeah, that's my thoughts on Sid and Nancy. And until next time, I'll see you later. See ya.